Well, welcome to another episode of Key Conversations. I'm Katy Norman.
I'm CJ Norman.
And obviously together we make up Norman Homes. And this is the podcast where we tell real stories, give simple frameworks and honest advice for all of you, whether you're buying, selling, or just trying to make the best decisions with the house that you're living in. We give no pressure, no fluff, just clear guidance. And today
we have another guest with us. We have Andy Gregory. Welcome. Andy is an estate planning attorney who helps individuals and families put the right legal protections in place for their future. He takes a thoughtful, practical approach and is passionate about making this complex process feel clear and approachable. Outside of work, Andy spends his time with his wife, Jessica, their cats, and staying active through running, biking, and travel.
Great.
Welcome.
Fun stuff.
Yeah, thank you so much for letting me come over. This is great.
Absolutely. So an estate planning attorney, one of those terms that a lot of people have heard, but maybe people don't really know what that means.
So it's funny when everyone asks you what you do, they ask you what you do. I'm a realtor, I sell houses, and they're like, okay, I kind of get that. People would say, well, what do you do? I say, I'm an attorney. They say, oh, what do you practice? And I say estate planning. And they go, oh, real estate? And I'm like, no, not real estate. So now I just
Funny.
go, I do wills and trusts. And as soon as I say wills and trusts, people are like, oh, okay.
So real estate, right?
Exactly. So it makes it a little bit easier for like the framework of, okay, I get wills and trusts. I've heard the words, and Andy can help me get those documents.
Interesting.
Absolutely. I guess, how did you get into something like this? Like, there's a million different things that you could practice within law. Why estate planning?
So I have kind of an interesting career. Worked some various jobs in my life, as most people do, and had a previous career with the federal government before kind of going into private practice. Mm-hmm. And that work really was a lot of what we're doing today. We're talking to people. And it's one of those things where estate planning is how I love it. It's transactional because we're doing something. You know, people come in with something and they leave with something. And it's also highly relational. We're talking about probably one of the most important things to them, their life and their wealth and their transfer of that wealth, but also as part of my practice, which I'm sure we'll get into, what happens after people pass away, which of course you can't get more intimate than that. And so I thought, there's this transactional piece, there's this relational piece. How do I kind of take what I used before and kind of use those gifts? And that's just something I think people have. People can allow conversations to go well and put people at ease in really, really stressful situations. And I have conversations, 20 a week on these type of topics. And I think people just really are like, oh, okay, Andy understands, and he's a real person. I always love it when I answer my phone with the firm, and they're like, oh, the lawyer's answering the phone, which is a little different than, I'm the legal assistant or I'm the paralegal, I'll leave a voicemail, and it's just that personal touch. I think people really can, I call myself like the body language doctor. I can really read people pretty well, and that's from that previous career. When you deal with all different types of people, some people that are wealthy, some people that aren't, people that are disabled, people that aren't, just a lot of different people. And that's really what the job is.
I think that's really cool. I mean, CJ and I were very similar in the sense that we came from different career backgrounds too, prior to real estate. And it substantially helped our real estate career, in my opinion. Just all of the skill sets that we learned from there. I did some of our viewers probably know this, but I did like reporting. CJ worked at like a logistics company and
Dale Carnegie training. It's funny. I actually ChatGPT'd us just the other day just to see if they've like updated anything about us. I was like, tell me about CJ and Katy Norman. And they nailed it. Like the backgrounds and everything, like your pageantry and your reporting days. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. And there's like a little blurb about me, but it's like this thing about you. I'm like, okay. Katy's a little bit more famous than I am, but
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Hair flip.
Yeah. And I love puzzles. This is people are puzzles
too.
And you have an estate plan. It sounds very boring, but it's like we're kind of putting things together and just trying to really find. I always say people have goals. Every single conversation I have with people, and I want to design a plan that fits all their goals. And really, the word I always like to use is efficiency. Just like selling homes, we want to try to do it as efficiently as possible.
Right.
yeah. Yeah, a lot of puzzles on our end too, especially when, there potentially is a death or a divorce, or just I have to buy a place and sell one at the same time. But the people you work with, is it people just kind of all across the board, or are you working with people that are like, hey, I'm thinking about retiring in 5 years and I should really have this laid out?
Well, yeah, great question. I had two conversations yesterday. One was from a gentleman, I think he was probably 28 or 29, been married about 5 years, told me he had two little kids. He's building a house kind of in a suburb of Minneapolis and wanted to know about trust planning. And do I put a house in the trust? What does that look like? And I had a conversation with him. And then later that same day, I had a conversation with a client of mine who's 82, going through some kind of serious health concerns. And we talked a little bit about estate planning when I said, hey, do you have an estate plan? And she said, no. And I said, well, we need to fix that. And she said, we do, because I'm working with her on another matter. And so it's all different types. And that's one of the nice things about the kind of the area of law that I practice is it does help a lot of different people at different stages, and they have different wants.
So so for the people watching this, what are the problems, or how, if they're watching this and thinking, do I need one of those? How do they identify if they should talk to you?
Well, one of the biggest things you said, doing what you guys do, real estate. That's one of the first conversations when I'm talking to people is that, do you own any real estate? Do you own any land? Do you own a cabin? Do you have real estate in other states? Because real estate is very interesting transferring. Many of the viewers, you guys, probably everyone in this office has some type of retirement assets. 401k, IRA, those type of things, bank accounts, very easy to transfer. But real estate's a little bit more tricky. There's deeds and laws about those type of things. And people that have those items can transfer them during life, but when you pass away, that's a little bit more difficult. And so I think that adds some complexity of, hey, real estate's a one tricky thing of not if I have a house, do I need an estate plan? I think it would be yes, but also do I have children? Do I have little kids? That was that call yesterday I had. He has two little kids, and just talked a little bit about making sure guardians were put in place, which is probably one of the most important things I talk to with young families. They're really not concerned about the stuff yet because they're young, they're growing. They're really concerned about if something happens to me or something happens to my wife or spouse, what's going to happen to our kids and where are they going to go?
Yeah, no, that's huge. And I'm sure there's a lot of things that you help people think about and consider. So when someone comes to you, regardless if they're the 28-year-old or the 82-year-old, what are some things that they should be thinking about or having, obviously I'm sure a lot of people come to you and they're like, I just don't even know the questions that I need to have answered. But what are some of those questions that they should think about answering? Like, who do my kids go to?
I think I always tell people, they ask that question, hey, Andy, we have a meeting coming up. Is there anything I need to bring? Is there anything I need to do? And I say, first, let's get some information kind of about your kind of life. Who are you? Do you have children? Do you have older children? Do you have younger children? Are you going to maybe receive an inheritance possibly from someone who's going to pass away, maybe a spouse or a parent or an uncle? But also give me a little bit more information about who are you kind of thinking that wants to be in charge of those things. Because some people have some indication, they have a brother or sister or an oldest child or something like that. And so I always tell people they don't have to become like super prepared. I do love those clients, I won't lie, that come in that are like, boom, 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 boom. I know exactly everything. And I'm like, whoa, okay, maybe you should sit in the chair. We kind of split spots. But I also like the opposite where I'm kind of guiding them because it is a little bit eye-opening. I mean, I would say almost every single conversation I have, it's so funny. People fill out kind of my online questionnaire people have before we meet and they find things. They're like, oh, we didn't realize that my spouse had this rollover 401k from 2 jobs ago. And we called and it has $100,000 in it. Wow. And, people have life and there's soccer practice and volleyball and they just don't remember these things. And so they actually thank me because I'm like, oh, maybe we can start to kind of corral this stuff, get a little bit more efficient. Why have 17 bank accounts when there's $2,000 in each of them? Maybe we should do one.
Right.
But people just do that. They open up an account to get a deal on a jet ski, and they never close it. And so there's that like pops up. It's almost like a spring cleaning. If the best word I can describe it, it's like you go through like, oh, what was I thinking? Why am I wearing that? That type of thing.
I like that, consolidating, because as business owners, we understand like bank accounts everywhere, and it's like what's where and who's what, and it can get really complicated. And then you throw kids and family, and like you said, sports practices and whatever, and then you're 82, you've got kids, grandkids running in and out of the home.
when I think of estate planning, outside of the couple things that we talk about, one thing that jumps to mind, and maybe it's fresh because my parents maybe like 5 years ago started this process with their people, is avoid probate.
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
It's the second thing I hear every single time. First is, how can I not pay any taxes when I pass away? There's something called estate taxes. Everyone out there, estate taxes is a thing. Avoiding probate is the second thing. And I always kind of joke around with people. There's two things universally people don't like. I was at the airport last week picking my wife up, and I noticed this all the time when you're at the airport. Waiting for stuff, paying for stuff. Those are two things people, unless you guys are different, no one likes doing that.
You nailed it.
That's what probate does. It makes you wait, and it makes you pay. And really, you're paying attorneys typically to help you through the process. And we can do some really great planning to help avoid that. And really, real estate is one of the number one triggers. And Katy, you mentioned it about bank accounts. Those are the two things that when people pass away and they own those things and they own them by themselves, we have a problem.
I've seen it with past clients I've worked with. It strains sibling relationships too, because you got that one person who's the executor. A lot of times it's the oldest born, and then maybe some or most siblings agree with that person, but there's always a detractor, and it always creates this thing.
Yeah.
So
I feel like the clearer the will was, the easier it is on the family.
Well, it's like, this is what mom and dad said, instead of us trying to figure out what they would have wanted with the state.
Yeah.
Right.
And really, it's kind of, wills are those things that I always say just get stuff to people. But then we talk a little bit about trust planning. And really, trust planning has a lot to do with when you have multiple pieces of real estate, and it just, and I always kind of tell a funny story. We don't have time for it today, but it's efficiency. And I always kind of say the will is kind of like a bus ticket. The trust is like an airline ticket. They both get to the same place, but I'm not sure the last time you guys been on a Greyhound bus that or maybe never. That situation, yeah, there you go. The situation is much different.
Yeah.
You see some interesting things on buses.
I did take the Amtrak.
There you go. Amtrak's not bad.
I took it from Detroit Lakes all the way to Chicago.
You get Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it's kind of bougie. You can go sleep there if you want.
There's the food car. You can go in there. Yeah.
It was kind of neat, but man, is it long.
It's like a throwback, to like the older days apparently.
Right.
But that's what I say. Trust, wills, they kind of do the same thing. They kind of get people to the right place. They just do it a lot differently. They do it a lot more efficiently. And when I talk about efficiency, I talk about the trust-based planning.
So I do have another question, and I could do a whole 3-hour segment with you on this because I get targeted on Instagram all the time.
Let's go.
But when we talk about trust, I know there's different kind of trust and everything. I don't know how much you want to get into that, but is what you do mostly for the planning for what happens after somebody passes, or is it for the people that are accumulating more assets and they just want to have it protected? And
it could be both.
Okay.
I always say typically when we're talking about kind of wealth transfer, we're using something called revocable trusts. Those are the terms that people use.
Those, yeah.
And you're right. Everything you see a YouTube, you watch something online, they're talking about trust. They use like living or family. Typically, they're talking about revocable trusts.
What does that mean? Revocable trust.
Revocable trust is, I started this thing. It's like an entity. I always say it's like a bucket. And it lives and breathes while I'm living, and I can change it. I can change a trustee. I can change the distribution. I can add money to go to a charity. But then when I pass away, it locks. Then it becomes irrevocable. And then because the person who started it is no longer living, they can't change it. And then, of course, the trustee who's named looks at like an instruction manual and divvies out what needs to be divvied out. And so that's kind of why we use the term revocable trust, which is very, very popular for wealth transfer. But there's some other things we can do, especially during life, regarding asset protection. Many people are worried about, hey, I'm in my 60s, I'm healthy right now, but I don't really know what's going to happen down the road, and I don't want someone to take all of our stuff. I heard that care is really expensive, and what am I going to do? I've been saving all this time and all this money for years, and I don't want my family not to receive anything. And so we can do some stuff during life that can really help with that process.
Still in a revocable trust?
Kind of. Well, it's a lawyer answer. It depends, right? So yes and no. Yes and no. You have to come back for more information on that.
So one cap on that. So if I had a revocable trust, and let's say Katy wasn't a part of it for some reason, and I died and I listed her as the beneficiary, it becomes irrevocable in my passing, and then Katy having it, would it then go back to revocable?
No, she would then. The language in the trust would operate, and divvy out however it needs to be divvied out. And there are some things, which is actually a new statute and law that just passed last year, something called dynasty trusts. We're one of the few states that were kind of around here that allowed trust to go on for a very, very, very long time. And there's a very fancy word called the rule of perpetuities. I won't bore you with it. It's a law school thing. Talks a little bit about how things should end. And in Minnesota, the law was things should end. Trust should end. But South Dakota, which is our nice neighbor to the west, they have lifetime dynasty trusts. And guess what? A very large amount of very, very wealthy people go to South Dakota to set up their estate planning so that they can move large amounts of wealth throughout their family. Minnesota wasn't able to do that until last year. And so we can now do, I believe it's 500 years.
Okay.
Wow.
And we can put trust. So for that example, you give Katy a trust and she'd have it for her lifetime and it could go on.
But she couldn't do anything that I could do.
Correct. She wouldn't be able to change any of the distributions. Let's say it was her and someone else. She can say, well, I never liked that other person. I'm getting all of it. She can't do that. She can only take care of her own section.
But if I had a 1,000-unit apartment complex in there, she could sell that?
She could.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But then there's rules within it, like of what happens once it's sold, I would assume.
Yes and no. You can. I always say that's what people say they're controlling from the grave. Yeah.
Yep.
We can build in. That's the nice thing about trust planning. I mention this to people all the time.
What do you want to happen?
You can do it is a blank slate. I've had people do, you can name it, type of distributions to their kids, and oh my gosh, there's no way I'm giving that to them, and everything you can joke around. I mean, it does happen. Some people are a little bit more vanilla. I want everything to go to our kids. I want it to go at this age, but then I always say I love planning for single people, because single people or people that don't have kids, because they can be super creative and they can give money away. And, I do a lot of charitable planning in my practice. I think it's highly valuable and highly underutilized, especially with wealthy people. There's a lot of really amazing things you can do to not only reduce taxes, help your family, and help a charity that you really care about. And it benefits all three parties. And people just don't understand that.
That is cool.
So that really reminds me of the fact that I think a lot of people don't realize that if you die and you don't have a will or a trust or any of these things set up, if they haven't worked with you, essentially, the state has rules of like what happens to their stuff.
They have a plan for you.
And that's where probate comes
exactly,
in.
just tonight.
So, like, what are some of those high level things that, like, if you didn't do this, this is kind of just like general rules of what happens?
I always, I'm old enough to know these choose your own adventure books.
Where those are great.
You flip them. Side story, love to go to the library. I would zero in on the choose your own adventure because it was like easy reading, and you'd like, oh my gosh, I want to do the dragons. But then so we're going.
Then you go back and you're like, what if I?
Exactly. We'll go down a tangent. That's when people went to libraries. Kudos to people in the library.
Yeah.
But it's kind of that. It's called an intestacy statute, which is a fancy word for family tree. And really, the state of Minnesota has a will for you, and it indicates where things are going to go. And it asks questions, just like a choose your own adventure book. First question asks, are you married? Yes or no? If it's yes, makes sense, everything to the spouse. If that answer is no, do you have children? Yes or no? Okay, if it's yes, everything goes equally to those kids. That might not be what you want. Or maybe you have an estranged child. You never know. Or maybe you have an adopted child. I mean, there's things that can happen. And then, of course, it kind of goes through aunts, uncles. It works its way down. And so people that don't do planning, there is a plan already set up. But what it also does is it points who's in charge. So not only is it going to say who's going to get it, but it's also going to say who's going to be in charge of it. And when I say in charge of the probate.
The executor.
Exactly.
And is it always the oldest?
No. So I just had a hearing this morning. And we have a hearing, and there was 4 nieces and nephews. They all have the same priority. So they're on the same level because they're all nieces and nephews of the decedent. And so
they all have like 25%, right?
25% of the estate, but also have the same right to be the executor. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to nominate one person to do it.
Right.
And we had to ask the court if that was okay. So let's say all 3 of us were brothers and sisters. We'd say, hey, we want Katy to do it. We'd bow out and let Katy do it. But if we don't bow out and you're like, I don't trust her, I want to do it too.
They just draw straws?
The judge makes that call.
Really?
And that's why judges are
What do they
judges.
make the call based on?
Never know.
A Tuesday. I mean, it could just be based on their experience or maybe their likelihood to make good decisions. I mean, there's no way to tell. Oftentimes, as good lawyers, we want to make sure we make that decision for them. So we do that in the background so that when we're presenting the case, I'm like, everybody, we've talked about this. We need to make sure like this is going to be much easier if we nominate somebody versus not. that doesn't always work, unfortunately.
So yeah, as we're talking through this, I can see why people don't like this process.
Yeah. I mean, that's what the efficiency piece.
Yeah.
I always joke around with people when they come see me. Let's say if my office is, here kind of in Edina, and I had a client that came up from Jordan. And I said, when you drove here, did you drive through Rochester and then Mankato and then came back over? And you're like, no, of course we didn't, Andy. We just drove up the freeway. Well, yeah, because it's efficient. No one does anything. But in this part of their life, I always say they're the figured out generation. Well, you know what? Oh, they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And that causes stress and problems.
Right.
Yeah. I was going to say, switching gears a little bit, kind of back to the point before when we were talking, you had mentioned that there are the two things that people want to avoid is taxes and probate. We talked about probate. And then for a lot of our viewers, we work with a lot of downsizers who, if they haven't started this conversation, they should reach out to you. But help me understand when there's like an inheritance tax on a property or something like that. I forgot exactly the parameters of it, but people get a property, they sell it from their parents or whoever, and they have to pay a large sum of gains tax. Does a trust help mitigate how much tax has to be paid out?
Great question. This is where we'll get a little nerdy when we talk about taxes. So there's a lot of really great things you can do with transferring real estate. And so I'll give you kind of good and bad. One of the worst things I think people can do is I'll talk to them and they'll say, well, Andy, I want to make sure we're getting stuff out of our estate because if we go into some type of assisted living or nursing care, they're going to take all of our stuff. We need to get it out. So we're just going to transfer our house to our daughter right now. And I say, well, we don't want to do that. I go, well, why? Well, when did you buy that house? Well, we bought it in 1971. Oh, really? Where is it? It's in Minnetonka. Oh, what did you pay? Oh, we paid $75,000. What's it?
So nice.
What is it worth now? $750,000. Oh, so do you understand that when you just transferred that to your daughter, you gave up something called basis, which is a fancy tax term for what you pay for capital gains. And there's rules about capital gains. We probably don't have a lot of time here, but when real estate is transferred at death, the person who receives it or the parties that receive it get something called a step up in basis, which means they get date of death value first when they sell it. So that $750,000 house on the date of that person passing, let's say is $755,000, they get it appraised, and then they sell it with you guys for $775,000. Well, now we have $20,000 of capital gains. That's a very, very, very large, small amount of money. I mean, a couple $100 versus that daughter who just
almost $700,000.
Correct.
Crazy.
I guess was
Yeah.
680.
So that step up in basis is we use that all the time with planning to cut down on that exact same piece.
That's huge.
That is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people do this all the time. They always move. They're moving property. They're filing deeds. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people that says, "Oh, I gave it to my uncle." Well, we might want to give it back to you because we want to make sure that right now we're selling it. 2 out of the last 5 years, you have a $250,000 exemption of capital gains tax over and above what you have. So if you haven't lived there for 2 of the last 5 years, you don't receive that exemption.
Yeah.
So this is the nerdy part. So I apologize for everybody.
No, this is great. For somebody that is watching this and is like, I am totally realizing that this is a blind spot that I've had and I need to do something about it right now. What does it look like to start that process with you? And obviously, I know you mentioned filling out a form and stuff, but there's, the wills, the trust, healthcare directive. What do things like this cost? How, fill me in.
I'll give you a great. I love stories. I think stories are
Stories
powerful.
are great.
And so last September, my wife, Jessica, she comes down one day. It was a Saturday. She says, "Andy, I think I want to put a patio on our backyard." And I said, "Okay." So what does every good homeowner do? You get quotes, right? You go out, you call the people. And so I called 3 people, just like every good, my dad taught me well. And so I called the first guy, drives up to the house, nice pickup truck, logo on the side, very construction guy looking.
That one was expensive.
Well, I'll tell you. So he walks up, he's got his clipboard, kind of that look, knocks on the door and introduces I introduce myself and he said, "Hey, Andy, could we maybe look around the backyard?" I said, "Perfect, yeah, let's go outside." So we walked outside. And he's kind of looking down. He's kind of bending. He's got his, his measuring tape out, and he's kind of doing his thing. And he said, "Hey, do you think we can go inside and chat?" I was like, "Perfect." So we go inside. We're sitting around the kitchen island, and he kind of says, "Hey, here's my quote." And I, kind of told him, what my wife wanted, which was just kind of like a square with those those paver type things. And he goes, "Yeah, here's the quote. And I said, just want to let you know, I'm going to get a couple other quotes. He's like, totally understand. This is what I do. Get it. So next day, second guy comes. Same pickup truck. Nice. But he's got an iPad in his hand. And I was like, interesting. Okay.
He was more expensive.
Yeah, exactly. He walks in, knocks on the door, same part. And he goes, no. He's like, we don't have to go in the back. He's like, can we just go in and talk? And I was like, okay. Oh, interesting. Have you been here before that I don't know about? Should I be nervous? Should I check the ring camera? But he opens up the iPad, and he had pulled all of the city records of our build and basically had like an application that drew this in like 3D, 4D. And like we were on our back patio, and it was like light to dark, and we had a fire pit, and there was a retaining wall, and he was the most expensive.
Really painted
He painted the picture. I was like, oh my gosh, I can like feel myself in here. Third guy came, very similar to the first guy. Estate planning is very similar. You know, what my wife wanted and what we really needed, our goals were that square pad. That's what the first guy delivered. We went with the first guy.
Okay.
The neighbor, I think, went with the second guy because there was a little bit more fancy.
Also, just from a real estate like some people cannot envision stuff, so they need someone like that, and it's a really great sales tactic.
Oh my gosh.
Which is also why when somebody sells their house, we tell them to, stage it.
Yeah,
and,
staging is an example of that.
Change the paint colors and things like that.
Drone footage and all the photos and the video. Yeah, I mean, it was intense. I told my wife afterwards because she wasn't there. I was like, this guy was incredible. Like they like had those little people. They had people barbecuing. I mean, it was amazing.
Wow.
And that's what estate planning is. It's we didn't need that. But there are people that do need that. There's more complexity when you have more things. And usually what happens is we do some more extensive planning based on the goals that people have.
Mm-hmm.
Is this an ongoing? Well, first, let me back up. I want to ask what age is like the ideal age to start these conversations? And then second part is this an ongoing thing throughout life? And if so, what's like the frequency?
Yeah. So I would say a lot of times people will call me and have kind of conversations when they are unfortunately maybe gone through something tough in their family. This triggers a lot of things, like they lost a relative, they lost a parent, something. And they're like, oh my gosh, honey, I don't think we've done anything. That is unfortunate, but does happen. There are some people that, they start having children and they're like, oh my gosh, we need to do something. Or they get older and they're like, you know what? I don't think we've ever maybe done anything like this, honey. I mean, we're 65 years old and we got kids that are in their 40s. And
I don't think that napkin that one night when we wrote out our will is going to cut
exactly,
it.
Exactly. No one witnessed that thing, right?
Right.
But I think that's what triggers it, is those type of things. And I think the process, I love it that you guys are in your field because you use kind of the real estate as an idea all the time. I said, when I first got married, me and my wife, apartment, futon, trust me, futon was there for a while. Mm-hmm. Queen size futon. We were tight in that futon. But then we grow older and you buy the bigger house. And then maybe the next bigger house. Estate planning can be very similar. It has life stages. Maybe when we start, maybe we're not talking about trust-based planning because we just don't have the things yet. But we want to get something in place so that we can have some efficient transfer. But then once we start building, we need more room or we need more planning. Mm. And so that kind of triggers with life stages.
I would imagine that there are things that you can kind of almost pre-plan for. Like if you're going to do this stuff in your life, like let's say we don't have kids yet, but we want to have kids and we don't know how many kids we'll actually end up having. But we know that this is the person that will take our kids regardless of how many we have. We know that we want everything we have built to transfer to them someday. Just equally, like we can probably write those kind of things in so that you don't.
Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, we would probably want to have some additional talks after people have children, just because there's a lot of laws that talk about when people inherit things and when they're kids versus just other people. Which is, and then I'll kind of circle back. You talked a little bit about the process.
Yeah.
I kind of joked around before we kind of got on that I usually answer the phone in my practice. And I'm like, Andy Gregory Law. And they're like, oh, I need to speak with Andy. Oh, well, you got him.
This is me.
So
I'm totally going to call the office now.
Exactly. Test me, because I've had people do this. They're like, you always say you answer the phone. I'm going to see if you actually do. And I actually do. Awesome. And so I think a lot of times people reach out to me. But I think a lot of times people just find me online, and which is great. The website is great, has a lot of good information, and I've done a fair amount of kind of advertising, marketing, kind of in and around kind of the West Metro. And I work with a couple publishers and do some really great stuff. And actually, just recently started advertising with the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Really?
Which is
Nice.
super awesome. I'm a big basketball fan. I'm on the other side of Rubo Gobert, which is
Oh, yeah.
hilarious. If I had it here, I'd show you.
Love it.
But it's just one of those things where you kind of, I would say you fish in a lot of ponds, and
Yeah.
people can find me in a lot of different places. And I'll tell you a funny story. In my office, there are some other offices obviously there, and this one gentleman, his name's Reed. He walked in probably about 2 months ago, and he stopped me. I've seen him a million times, and he stopped me. He goes, "It's Andy, right?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, I'm Reed." I said, "Nice to meet you." He goes, "I see you every morning," and I was like, "Okay, that's a very weird thing."
Surveying my backyard.
Yeah, weird thing to say. Are you with the contractor? I'm just joking.
Yeah, that's fine.
And he says, no. He's like, I work out at the Eden Prairie Community Center, and your ad shoots up I swim, and it shoots up on the TV, and I see your face every morning at like 6:30 in the morning. I said, there you go. So
You're my
hilarious.
motivation.
exactly.
That's
That's-
awesome. Would you say you get most of your business from those various places that you have ads, or would it be word of mouth?
I think a lot of it is word of mouth. That's what starts it. It's very similar to your industry, where you just do a great job with a single person, a couple, and they're like, oh my gosh, like I worked with Katy and CJ, and they were like awesome and really easy to work with, and just the process was easy, and it just flowed really well. And they did everything they said they were going to do, and I think that's just what people can't get away from that just because of how relational the work is. People enjoy that.
Obviously, depending on the complexity, I know the amount can change, like how much something like this costs, but is there a ballpark that people can kind of expect? Like, this is kind of where basic planning starts, or we do a consult and then I put together, this is how much it's going to cost you, or what does that look
Yeah,
like? Because I
so-
feel like sometimes people can get nervous to take a first step if they have no idea what
That
kind of
could
commitment they're getting
a huge
themselves
barrier.
into.
Yeah. I mean, cost is something I always tell folks. I'm very transparent with cost. First conversation we have, we're talking about it. Always that first consultation is free. Every single time I talk to people, whether it's general estate planning, whether it's after someone passes away and they have some questions, always free. And I always say it's different. I want to say tiers isn't the right word, but there's different needs. And when we do probably some of that will-based kind of initial planning, I would say probably a few $1,000s. When we get into some more of the sophisticated planning, then we're talking about just a little bit more. Because of course there's a lot more work. You guys are business owners.
More complex.
Yeah, you indicated that we have some various real estate ventures. Well, that is a little bit different than if you just have one bank account, one 401k, and life insurance.
Yeah.
There's a lot to do. And one kind of shout out, especially for business owners, doesn't matter even what type of business. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have 100 employees. There's a lot of stuff tied into this, and there's a lot of decisions that have to be made. And if that person has passed away, or you're not signing that information to your trust so that someone can be in charge, that's a big problem. People can't sign checks and pay bills, and things aren't very good. Especially, I've found that some people that start businesses aren't always the best with record keeping.
Yeah, no.
Yep, most of them.
Exactly. They don't have the operating agreement just sitting on the table.
Yeah.
Or they're like, what is that operating agreement?
Not typically. I can imagine it's really hard to even just track down like what needs to get paid, where does it need to get paid, who, like how do I get into anything, like all that kind of stuff, which I'm sure is really helpful from what you do.
I would also say no matter the cost up front, I'm sure it like almost always pays for itself, if not way more. I mean, just that whole step up thing, transfer property. I mean, there's no way you're charging like tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars for the average person, which that could be their savings.
I had a client here just about a month ago, and we were working on it, a case after someone passed away. I was doing a trust administration, and they passed away here in Minnesota. We have estate tax, and that estate tax limitation is about $3 million. So people that pass away, their net worth is higher than that. They pay a very large amount of estate tax, usually about 15 to 18%. So this client passed away. Their estate was $3,084,000. So the $84,000 was taxed at that high level. And so the Department of Revenue sent out a bill for $27,000. Of course, and I was joked around with the family because I did some planning for this person. They said, oh my gosh, why do we have to pay that? I said, well, we've had many conversations about this. I said, but I can tell you that the planning did not cost $27,000, but we just saved a very, very, very large amount. than other part.
Totally.
So it just it does pay in kind of spades based on what we can do, and I've have many stories about the opposite of when we don't do something.
Oh my gosh, I'm sure you do. And
probably
honestly, we
pretty
probably
painful.
have to have you back because I think that we could talk about this all day, and maybe we'll have to segment it down into like very specific, like focused on this little part of the estate plan, or maybe focus on just trusts or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someday, because like we could talk about this all day, and there's just so much complexity. One of the things I want to ask you is, obviously, how do people find you?
Well, you can find me swimming at the. I'm kidding. One place.
Yep.
Exactly. Hey.
There's gonna be like 5 people that show
Exactly.
up.
Exactly. I just love. I'm gonna get a flutter of like emails about like, hey, I also see you at the pool. I'm not in the pool, everybody. I'm on the wall of the pool. And so, like I said, I do obviously. I'm super connected to kind of our community. My dad was a public school teacher for 37 years, so education kind of rubbed off on me. I do a lot of adult education in and around kind of West Metro. I actually have a class tonight, and but I'm also in the Eden Prairie Rotary Club and also the Eden Prairie Chamber of Commerce, and so just people find me that way. And then obviously just kind of at the website. I spent a lot of time in the name Andy Gregory Law. Just whiteboarded it forever. I'm kidding.
Yep.
It was it's
Norman
Kind of like
Holmes.
Norman Holmes.
exactly. You guys did a great job with that.
I know.
Thanks.
But I know you talked about it for a while. You're like, should we do K and CJ? We did them acronyms.
Yeah.
Yep. Should we do Norman Real Estate?
Yeah.
Norman
Norman
Holmes
Properties.
team?
Yeah.
You play
Yep.
with it. And then I just stuck with it. I asked my wife, and she's like,
Why
that
are we
one.
overthinking
Yeah.
it?
And I was like, great.
Yeah.
So we do it. But yeah, people find me online. I do some social media stuff. Not as much, I think, as probably you guys do. People they don't necessarily find you technically online, but I do love posting. I do a lot of blog posting kind of through the site. Just really interesting things. One of which is just coming out here, I would say, in the next week or so, talking a little bit about privacy.
Cool.
People like their privacy.
Absolutely.
That's why they have shades on windows.
Yeah.
And people like that with their estate as well, especially when they pass away.
Yeah. So if somebody was watching this and they're like, all right, I got to call him now. Like, would it be a phone number or an email or a website?
Yeah.
Where would
So
be a
all
good
three.
starting point?
So my number at the firm, 612-562-9130. My email address is just andy@andygregorylaw.com. And the website address is just www.andygregorylaw.com.
Love it.
Yeah. And obviously, you already mentioned this, but you do a lot of stuff around the community. So if people wanted to come learn from you at one of these events, you have those on your website,
Yep,
right?
they're on the website, and it's a healthcare directive and a power of attorney class.
Fun.
So people actually come to the class, they learn about what this thing is, this estate planning thing. We talk about those 2 forms, and then people get those forms when they leave.
That's
So
awesome.
they kind of, it's a great call to action for people to actually, they're super important. Really anyone over 18 should have those 2 documents because they're just very, 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 people need them.
Yeah.
Cool. I love that. Well, last question is, if someone only remembers one thing from this conversation today, what's the most important thing that you want them to remember?
Great question. I would say efficient planning really helps not only you during life, but it helps your family after something happens to you. Is I think I kind of I will die on that hill that just efficient planning just solves a lot of problems because I've seen it where families are kind of torn apart. No more weddings, no more birthdays, and it can be anything from $100,000 to the dining room table, and you'd be surprised. And it just people are people, and people are messy, and it's just that the efficient way to do that and really tell your story after you pass away is the best.
I love that.
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome.
All right, we better wrap up. Thank you for tuning in to this episode, and be sure to subscribe, like, comment, all the fun stuff, so that you're not missing next week's episode. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah. See you next week.
Thanks
Thanks.
again. If you enjoyed today's episode, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
We'd love it if you'd share this with someone who'd be interested. And don't hesitate to reach out if you want to connect. We're always happy to chat. Thanks for tuning in.
We'll see you next time.